Hey, what's going on, fam? So today's video is a topic that I thought I might have to make, and I kind of saw coming that I probably would have to make this video. Excuse me, had a little hiccup there. But anyway, what I was saying was, this is a topic about something that I didn't want to have to make, but I thought that or that I might have to. And what I'm talking about is the potential seeds of division between ADOS, American Descendants of Slaves, and Foundational Black Americans as movements. Now, let me be clear, they both are the same exact thing as far as lineage. They mean the same exact thing as far as lineage. But as far as movements, um, they've been pretty much hand in hand up until recently. And I saw the potential that they would not be hand in hand a while ago. And I'll talk about what I meant by me seeing that they would not be hand in hand or seeing this coming out, get into more detail on what I meant about that a little bit later in this video. But the first thing I want to talk about is what happened recently that's sparking this whole video, um, and the reason why I'm making this video today. And it's that Tone Talks and Tariq Nasheed, two figureheads in the movement. Now, again, ADOS is not a movement, it's not a group, it's not an organization, it's a lineage, but it's also a movement to acknowledge the lineage. And even though everyone who's in America, anybody, it doesn't matter whether what your politics are or what you believe, it's strictly lineage based. So nothing changes an ADOS from being an ADOS lineage wise. But there are things that change you from being ADOS or FBA movement wise. Like, for example, if you're against reparations, that doesn't change the fact that you're an ADOS by lineage. But if you're against reparations, you're not really an ADOS by the movement, or at least by the movement standards. But basically, what happened was there was a disagreement, and the disagreement was based on the fact that, or it all started with Ebro. And the reason why I want to point out who it started with Ebro is because Ebro was someone who should not have any credibility with someone like Tone Talks or anyone in the ADOS movement. Ebro is the same person who pushed the propaganda lie that ADOS is funded by Nazis. This is the same man who was out here pushing and promoting the Harriet movie and saying that ADOS people and black Americans and black people in general should go support that movie. This is the same person who's cited Talib Kweli as a source for information. So Ebro, this B-list celebrity host of Hot 97 in New York, should have no credibility with someone like Tone Talks. Nothing that Ebro calls out or points out about ADOS should have any credibility with someone like Tone Talks. Yet Tone Talks let Agent Ebro, of all people, provoke him into attacking Tariq, or allowed Ebro to plant the seeds for Tone to go at Tariq. And when I say go at, let me be clear. Tone wasn't overly disrespectful to Tariq. He didn't make any personal attacks on Tariq, on his person or on his character. So let me be clear. He did stick it to the realm of disagreement. He did not attack Tariq as a person or as an individual. He only disagreed with Tariq based off what he interpreted Tariq to be saying. But I'm just saying that the fact that he even disagreed with Tariq based off something that Ebro pointed out to him, to me is kind of shows bad judgment by Tone, and makes me wonder if Tone was really going at Tariq over what Ebro pointed out, or was it something else? Because I believe Tone is smart enough and should be smart enough to know that Ebro is not a credible source of anything. So anything that Ebro is pointing out, you need to do some further investigation before any information that Ebro is pointing out. You should do some further investigation on that information before you act on it. But let's talk about what Tariq said, and let's see what's so controversial about it. So let's look at what Tariq said.
Democrats want to invest in green.
Sorry about that. But let's look at what Tariq said. That's some audio from Trump. Um, but this is what Tariq was tweeting. Trump is actually talking about providing specific tangibles to foundational black Americans. Yet the Democrats who black Americans haven't been so naively loyal to are adamant, excuse me, got some sniffles there, are adamant about not doing anything for specific for black Americans. So why should we honestly support the Democrats? So this is what Tariq said that Ebro pointed out that Tone Talk started to go at Tariq for. And again, when I say go at, I don't mean personal attacks, I just mean disagreement. But let's look at what Tariq really was saying, or what at least I interpret Tariq to have been saying, and what he also explained himself to basically have been saying. Because people who listen to Tariq or have been listening to him for a while knows what he meant, or should know what he meant. Despite the existence and the success of the new black media, of the ADOS movement, of the foundational black American movement, we know that if the elections were held tomorrow, the majority of black people would still vote for a Democrat. End of story. With as much momentum as we have in this movement, if the election were held tomorrow, the majority of black people would still vote for a Democrat that does not have a black agenda. That is a problem. That is what our whole movement exists for and is trying to overcome. Is the continual voting for politicians that offer nothing meaningful in return. So that's who Tariq was talking to more so than the ADOS movement. What he was doing was he was pointing out is that all black people, or most black people, already have an understanding that the Republicans are racist. But most black people, especially those outside of the ADOS and foundational black American movement, do not have an understanding that the Democrats are just as bad, if not worse, because we vote for them and then they put in policies against us. At least when the Republicans put policies in against us, we didn't vote for them. But when we vote for somebody and they implement policies that harm us and work against us, that's almost political suicide. Because you are actively voting for someone who is actively oppressing you. And that's what Tariq was speaking to. Not that ADOS or black Americans in general should go out and vote for Trump. Tariq Nasheed has consistently, before Trump was even elected as president, called Trump out for being a white supremacist. Consistently. As of 2 weeks ago, he was pointing out how it's mostly black immigrants who are the black people who come to America and support Trump, as a way to show this is another reason why black people should not be supporting immigration. He points out how other non-black immigrants are some of the main ones who come over here and vote for Trump. He points out how Hispanic immigrants come over here and vote for Trump and then they get deported or their family members get deported. So why would he point these things out as a way to point out this is why we should not be supporting immigration, because of the fact that they support Trump, and then turn around and say that we should support Trump? That doesn't make sense, because that's not what he was saying. That's not what he was saying. This is based on a misconception and a misinterpretation, at least in my opinion. But the fact that that Tone and then even Yvette kind of chimed in on Twitter, you guys jumped down Tariq's throat, and then Tone even jumped on YouTube and made a 25-minute video about why ADOS shouldn't support Trump. All over this misconception, because y'all don't consistently listen or follow Tariq. And it's a misconception that was pointed out to you by someone who has no interest of ADOS at heart. Someone who's going to say these things about ADOS anyway. It's almost as if you were going out of your way to prove to Ebro something when you can't prove anything to Ebro. Because Ebro was getting his information from Talib Kweli, who also uses, speaking of, and this is another point I want to make. So people want to say, well, it doesn't matter whether or not Tariq meant to support Trump. We don't even want it sounding like we support Trump because there are people who are already saying that we support Trump, and we don't want to play into that. But let me point out what's wrong with that, with making that point that Tariq should have been more careful with what he said or whatever. No, Tariq should not have been more careful with what he said because there was nothing to be careful about. Because if we're going to be scared of people like Ebro saying that the ADOS movement is a right-wing movement based off Tariq saying that, Tariq gets his information from Talib Kweli. So Talib Kweli is the same one who uses pictures of Yvette Carnell in a MAGA hat to say that the ADOS movement supports Trump. Is anybody who's out here critiquing Tariq, because I know most of the people who are people who already don't like Tariq anyway. That's number one. Number two, though, the people who are out here saying that Tariq shouldn't have said it because it makes it sound like he supported Trump, are you guys going to hit up Yvette and tell her she needs to apologize for wearing the MAGA hat? It doesn't matter the context that she was speaking in on that video because it plays into the idea that ADOS, the ADOS movement, supports Trump. Is anyone going to tell Yvette Carnell to back away from her actions that make it look like the ADOS movement supports Trump? Is anyone going to get Yvette Carnell to retract her statement that Trump was right when he said black people are poor and have nothing to lose? Because again, remember, we're ignoring all context. We're ignoring all the criticisms Yvette Carnell has laid against Trump. And we're going to hyper focus on what we're scared of, what people are already going to say anyway about the ADOS movement. My point is that these people, Ebro, Talib Kweli, these kind of agents, they're going to say these things about the ADOS movement no matter what you do. If you come out and speak against Trump every day, all day, they're still going to say you're a Trump supporter simply because you're saying we shouldn't vote for Democrats. So there's no proving yourself to these people. So the fact that Tone went at Tariq almost as a way to prove to Ebro and others that the ADOS movement is not a Trump supporting movement, it's not a good reason. Because if that's the case, we need to go at Yvette Carnell for wearing MAGA hats and talking about Trump is right when he says black people are poor and have nothing to lose. That's at least two different occasions that anti-ADOS people have used as propaganda to say the ADOS movement is a MAGA movement. So again, Tariq had nothing to be careful about unless Yvette Carnell and Tone have a lot to apologize about. If Tariq should have been more careful in what he said about Trump, then Yvette Carnell and Tone Talks needs to, or especially Yvette Carnell at least, needs to retract her statements that are continuously used by people like Talib Kweli and people like Ebro to say that the ADOS movement is a MAGA movement. But again, Talib, or not Talib, but Tone has no reason to be going at Tariq over anything that Ebro points out to him because of the things that I just pointed out. But especially something that's a misconception, something that Yvette Carnell is still actively attacked over. Now that I've talked about that, there's something else I want to talk about. And that's that I kind of saw this coming. Because I feel that certain people in the ADOS movement already don't like Tariq because what's not talked about is that Tariq and Yvette have not always gotten along. Tariq has at times said that he doesn't trust Yvette and he thinks she's kind of funny style. Um, Yvette has said things about the Hidden Colors documentaries or things about Tariq being misogynistic or whatever. So they don't have the most amicable history. And for reasons like that, along with some other reasons I'm about to name, I have never really fully trusted Yvette and Tone to lead a movement like this. Now, let me be clear again. ADOS is not a group. So Yvette and Tone are not leaders of ADOS as a group because it's not a group. But it is a movement. Tone acknowledged it was a movement yesterday in his video, his 25-minute video going off about Tariq's misconception, about his misconception about what Tariq said. He said it yesterday. Even though ADOS is a lineage, it is also a movement. And as far as the movement part, Tone and Yvette are figureheads of that movement. And I don't trust, and like I just said, for one of the reasons I just named, which is the history between Tariq and Yvette, among some of the other things I'm about to name, I never fully trusted Tone and Yvette to be the leader of a movement like this. And I was kind of glad that Tariq came up with the FBA distinction, because I was always slightly fearful that there may come a time when ADOS and FBA is movements. Now, as a lineage, they are always the same thing and will always be the same thing because they are the same thing. They refer to the same exact lineage. But as far as movements, there may come a time, I hope that there doesn't, but I'm making this video just in case there does. There may come a time when the ADOS movement and the FBA movement may need to break off from each other and distinguish themselves from each other. I hope that it doesn't, but there may come a time where it does. And the reason why there may come a time when it does is because, like I said, I don't trust Yvette and Tone. I have never trusted them, fully trusted them to be the ones to lead a movement like this. Let me list the main reason why I have never fully trusted them to lead this type of movement. The number one reason I have never fully trusted them is that I strongly feel that Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore do not understand white supremacy. Do not understand white supremacy, because let me say this: I don't think any black person truly understands white supremacy to its fullest extent. Because if any of us did, maybe we could topple it. But Yvette Carnell and Tone Talks don't understand it sufficiently enough to lead a movement like the ADOS movement. Why am I saying that? The reason why I'm saying that is because the ADOS movement exists because of white supremacy. The ADOS movement has to exist because of the system of white supremacy. No, it's not because of immigration. It's not because of Jim Crow. It's because of white supremacy. Because as many people in the ADOS movement will tell you, the biggest wave of immigration and the majority of black immigrants that are here arrived after 1965. ADOS people will tell you this in a heartbeat as reason to say why black immigrants should not receive reparations, which I agree with, which is again why I support the ADOS movement in general. But with that being said, were black people equal before 1965 with white people? Did ADOS have an equal standing in America with white Americans before 1965? Was there no racism, and then as soon as immigrants and black immigrants started coming to America, that's when racism started? That's when the wealth gap started? No. American descendants of slavery. There wasn't no black immigrants running around during slavery. Otherwise, they would deserve reparations, right? So who was practicing the racism and oppression against us then? White people. Who was practicing racism against us during the 50s, the 60s, the 20s? Who was stealing our houses and stealing our wealth that we built up over and over and over again, and kept burning it down and taking it away? Black people will own homes and whole communities. Who was doing that? Was it immigrants that burned down Black Wall Street, or was it white supremacists? So I just want to say that to establish that the number one problem for ADOS and the reason why it has to exist is not because of black immigrants. It's not because of any of this other stuff that Tone and Yvette talk about. It's not because of Democrats. It's not because of Trump's opportunity zones. It's because of white supremacy. That is the common denominator before and after immigration. That is the common problem for ADOS before and after immigration. So now that we've established that the real problem is white supremacy, let's talk about why Yvette and Tone, I don't feel, are have sufficient enough understanding to lead a movement that's created because of white supremacy. Interracial dating. Now let me be clear. Tariq, for the record, does not denounce interracial dating. He says that he doesn't denounce it because he feels like if you tell people what they can't do, that makes them want to do it more, which I can completely understand that stance, and I'm okay with him taking that stance. But Yvette and Tone, when they defend interracial dating, it's because they sound like they want to participate in it, and Yvette has participated in it, and may still be participating in it for all I know. And Tone adamantly defends it as if he's participated in it or wants to keep the door open for him to participate in it in the future. And let me say this. Let me point out, give you a little bit more specific examples. For example, Meghan Markle. A lot of ADOS people were saying that they had no mercy for Meghan Markle when she was experiencing a lot of racism as a result of her marrying Prince Harry. And Tone defended, because people were trying to wag the finger at ADOS people for not supporting Meghan and all of this and saying this is another reason why we're such horrible people, whatever. And Tone went out to defend ADOS people, but what he did when he defended ADOS people was because of his stance on interracial dating. He went out of his way to say that the reason why ADOS people don't feel bad for her is because she should have known better, which is what ADOS people are saying. So don't get me wrong. We are saying she should have known better. That's the exact reason why we're saying we don't feel bad for her. But he's trying to say the reason why she should have known better is not because she married a white man, but because she married a royal white man. And the royal family was a key player in the slave trade and all of this. And when you marry somebody whose family was a key player in the slave trade, that's what makes you experience racism when you date when you date him. But that, again, that shows, that statement is that reasoning that Tone showed, and going out of his way to make sure that it's not because he's white, but because he's a royal white man. That's why Meghan Markle experienced racism. That's the kind of thing that shows me that Tone doesn't understand racism. Because there's plenty of black people who date or marry into white families and experience racism as a result of that, and they did not marry a white royal prince. Halle Berry, her ex, was calling their daughter a nigger and nappy head and all of this, and going out of his way to tell her that she's white, and calling Halle Berry an N word, B word. There was a couple of years ago on Facebook, this biracial girl who was supporting the Colin Kaepernick movement. She was posting screenshots of her own white mother calling her the N word. This is an American biracial girl with an American white mother, and her white mother was inboxing her, calling her the N word for supporting Colin Kaepernick. That woman was not a royal princess. Halle Berry wasn't married to Prince Harry or Prince William. Asians and Hispanics come over to this country all the time, and Arabs, and tell their children that they shouldn't date black people, and black people experience racism. Hell, some black boy a couple of weeks ago was killed by his Hispanic girlfriend's father because he was black. He wasn't a Hispanic king. His family wasn't involved in the slave trade. Yet Tone, because he doesn't understand white supremacy, and he's going out of his way in everything he does to justify dating interracially, he has to go out of his way to say that the reason why Meghan Markle doesn't deserve sympathy is because Prince Harry is a prince. Not because he's white, but because he's a prince. When it's the opposite. It's not because he's a prince, it's because he's white. Now, I will say this, the racism is intensified because he's a prince, and that brings more focus on her. So Meghan Markle would not be experiencing the degree of racism she's experiencing if she married an average white man. But she still could very well be vulnerable to racism. And it has nothing to do with whether or not the person is a royal prince. But again, someone like Tone Talks, who doesn't understand white supremacy, he has to go out of his way to distinguish that the reason why someone like Meghan Markle experiences racism in an interracial relationship is because of the fact that Prince Harry is a prince. When if we look at the facts of other black people who have experienced racism as a result of the partner they chose, either directly from their partner or from their partner's family or friends. And these people are not royal white people or royal Asians or royal Hispanics or royal Arabs. Yet they will still experience anti-black racism as a result of dating a non-black person. That's just one example. We can go back and we can look at things like the fact that Yvette Carnell has consistently disrespected and attacked someone like Dr. Claude Anderson, who has been talking about black Americans as a distinct ethnic group a lot longer than Yvette Carnell. Yvette Carnell should pay homage to someone like Dr. Claude Anderson, but instead she attacks him. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that she should bow down or agree with everything Dr. Claude Anderson says, because um, there's plenty of people who a lot of black people respect who I don't agree with everything they say. Whether it's people who are deceased or people who are living now. For example, Yvette and Tone, I'm talking about them. I don't agree with everything they say, even though a lot of people do. So I'm not saying that Yvette owes some reverence to Dr. Claude Anderson. Well, I'm kind of am, but I'm saying it's okay to disagree with him, even though I do feel like she should have reverence for him. I'm also saying it's okay to disagree with the man. It's okay to disagree with Dr. Frances Cress Wilson, even though I don't think she should have disrespected her legacy like that after she was dead, even though the Vet Carnell did do that. And again, I listened to the video broadcast way back when, like not way back when, but like a year and a half ago, I think it was, where Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore did their whole broadcast justifying defending interracial dating, and they were all jumping in circles. Like, to me, if you're gonna be okay with interracial dating, to me it's better to just say something like, Tariq, look, you can't control people, so why even bother? Because the more you tell them not to do it, the more it's gonna make them want to do it. That's just common sense to me, the way Tariq approached it. But Yvette Carnell and Tone, they have to do all these mental gymnastics about racecraft and how race is all made up, and it's like, come on, dude. Like, I get that race is made up, but it's also very real. We see the consequences to this day. Again, before immigration, it was all about race. Even after immigration, it's still all about race. It's kind of also about lineage now too, but it's still all about race. Even though Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore, when it's convenient, they'll try to say they only talk about lineage, but they talk about race a lot too. Hell, even recently during the Botham Jean case, Tone was talking about race, and then someone pointed out to him that Botham Jean was an immigrant, and he said, "Hey, it's not always about whether or not someone's an immigrant. These are things that black men as a race experience." So race is real, and Tone and Yvette have acknowledged that on multiple occasions that it is real. But when it comes to interracial dating, all of a sudden it's all made up and it's all fake, even though everything else they say political wise, race is real. But then when it comes to time to lay down with somebody, all of a sudden race is made up. And again, like I said, if they would have gave reasoning like Tariq, I would have been a lot more okay with them being okay with interracial dating rather than their whole, um, you know, uh, mental gymnastics. Read the book called Racecraft. Race is all made up. Blah blah blah. And they almost sounded like a white person. I don't see color. Race is all made up. I'm colorblind. We all the same. Like, you started to sound real suspect defending interracial dating. Yvette and Tone did. They started to sound real suspect. And so these are the things that, like I said, reason why I'm personally kind of didn't trust the movement from the beginning. But of course, I didn't come out saying this stuff because I didn't want to come off like an agent, come off like someone who was out here sowing, trying to sow the seeds of division and split up the movement and whatever else. Because basically, ADOS and FBA were in lockstep up until recently. They were the exact same thing up until recently. They still are the exact same thing as far as lineage. But the reasons why I kind of never fully trusted Yvette and Tone from day one are starting to rear their ugly heads. So I'm gonna go ahead and speak on it just in case it gets worse. My stance is already known, just in case it gets worse from here. When Yvette and Tone were getting at Tariq on Twitter, Yvette said some things that I also want to address. Yvette said to Tariq that he shouldn't be supporting Republicans, which again, let me again say he was not supporting Republicans, but because that's how she was interpreting it, that he should not be supporting Republicans because Republicans actively attack us with things like opportunity zones, and Democrats are only passive with their neglect, and it's so much worse to support a Republican. And Tariq pointed out how that was BS because he pointed out how Biden's law was an active attack to us, on us, and how Obama's blue alert law was an active attack on us. So he completely shut that narrative down that the Republicans are are actively aggressing us, and the Democrats are somehow just sitting back. They're not really hurting us. They're just not helping us, which is what Yvette had the audacity to let come out of her mouth. Or not the audacity, but she spewed some totally stupid nonsense there. And I guess because she knew that it was totally stupid nonsense, then she turned around and started babbling about how she's been against Obama for 10 years, which makes me want to talk about her history. As recently as 2016, Yvette Carnell was supporting Bernie Sanders. Back in 2016, Tariq Nasheed was calling out Bernie Sanders. Back in 2016, when Bernie was out here talking about how reparations aren't unfeasible, and when people was asking about reparations, he was saying no with aggression, and his face was turning all red. Yvette Carnell was supporting him. And during that same time, Tariq Nasheed was calling him out specifically for not supporting reparations. Yeah, Yvette Carnell wants to talk about how she's been against Obama for 10 years. Well, all that being against Obama still doesn't show that you were politically mature if you want to turn around and support someone like Bernie Sanders in 2016. So Yvette was trying to put out this thing that she has a longer track record than Tariq, and how somehow but she's not. And again, this is a reason why I don't trust Yvette, because just as recently as 2 years ago, you were still falling for mainstream Democrat shills like Bernie Sanders. You were still falling for benign, neglecting Democrats like Bernie Sanders. And again, that doesn't mean that people can't evolve and change, which is why, even though I knew that at the time I made the why I support ADOS over Pan Africanism video. But the reason why I'm not going to bring up that stuff is because I'm trying to stay on code. But at this point, Yvette and Tone are starting to act as if they are off code. So now is the time to bring up that stuff. So again, fam, I don't want to make my videos too long, but this is definitely a video where I needed to, take my time and speak on some things. Um, I just want to say these are reasons. Oh, one other reason I want to say before I wrap up the video. My Marion Williamson videos. I made three of them. Part of the reason why I made three of them is not because I'm obsessed with Marion Williamson, but because I'm more so, I guess, quote unquote, obsessed with ADOS people not being fooled. Because what I started to realize, especially with the Marion Williamson thing, is that a lot of ADOS people are like Yvette Carnell, meaning that they came straight off the Democrat plantation, straight into the ADOS black-centered politics. Whereas people like myself and Tariq Nasheed have been involved in black-centered politics for a lot longer than most of the people who are more in the Yvette Carnell ADOS camp of things. People in the FBA movement, Tariq Nasheed side of it, have more of a history of being in black-centered politics. What do I mean? We came from listening to people like Amos Wilson, Khalid Muhammad, Dr. John Henry Clark, Claude Anderson. These are the kind of people that FBAs were listening to and getting their information from before the ADOS movement. People like Yvette and Tone, they were going to Henry Louis Gates. They still cite a lot of his information for the ADOS movement. They were listening to Barack Obama and Nate Silver and these people. I don't want to say Barack Obama, but these kind of mainstream Democrats people. They came straight off voting for Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and being these kind of mainstream liberals, white liberal type people. Yvette Carnell worked in the Democratic Party for a while. These are people who came off straight off being mainstream liberals, which means that their foundation of information and their knowledge and understanding of white supremacy is different than someone who's been studying not Yvette Carnell, Dr. John Henrik Clark and Dr. Ben Yakinen and all these people. And again, I'm not saying that all these scholars and notice I'm naming are people that we have to 100% go along with and agree with, because obviously a lot of the people I'm naming were Pan-Africans, and I'm not a Pan-African. So I don't agree with everything they said, and I'm not saying that people in the ADOS movement should. But what I'm saying is that this kind of background shows who has more of a history and track record of understanding white supremacy as opposed to the other side. The reason why I'm also saying that too is because, like I said, back to the Marianne Williamson point, my Marianne Williamson videos, I made 3 videos about that woman. Those videos, of all my videos, those videos got by far the most dislikes. Why did they get the most dislikes? Because the majority of my channel is obviously an ADOS oriented channel. So the majority of my listeners and viewers are ADOS people. But it also shows that because of the majority of my listeners are ADOS people, a lot of ADOS people like Marianne Williamson because they don't understand white supremacy. And if you don't understand what I'm saying about Marianne Williamson, go back and listen to any one of or all 3 of my Marianne Williamson videos. This woman is openly and blatantly disrespecting black people, and she's a white supremacist. And if more black people came from the FBA side of things, or the FBA background side of things, where they had been listening to people like Frances Cress Welsing and Dr. Neely Fuller instead of disrespecting them, they would understand how Marianne Williamson is being a white supremacist and how she is untrustworthy and how she is dangerous. But because you guys come from voting for mainstream Democrats, it's easy for you to fall back in the white savior, white mommy syndrome, because you were just doing that 1 or 2 years ago. Whereas ADOS people and FBA people have been distancing themselves from white mommy, white savior mentality for 10, 15 years for some of us, or a lot of us, or at least 5 years for many of us. We're not new to this like a lot of the ADOS people are new to this black-centered politics thing. And again, the evidence is shown in the amount of dislikes that my Marianne Williamson video got. Speaking of Marianne Williamson, even though some of the main people that she's disrespecting is Yvette and Tone, they still won't call her out. And sometimes I wonder, is it because they don't really understand how disrespectful and racist she's being because they don't understand white supremacy? Which is, again, makes me wonder, can I really trust them to lead a movement like this? Or is it only a matter of time until they start compromising on it? Because they were so friendly with Marianne Williamson, I wonder how vulnerable are they to compromising on the amount that we're owed, which is very important, because not giving us enough is worse than not giving us reparations at all. Giving us insufficient reparations, and again, go listen to my Marianne Williamson video so I don't rehash the problem, or rehash why I'm saying that and try to re-explain it. But so if you want the reasoning behind that statement, go listen to my Marianne Williamson's video. But I'm saying definitively, getting an insufficient amount of reparations is worse than getting no reparations. Go listen to my Marion Williamson videos if you want my reasoning behind that. And these are the reasons, again, all the reasons I just stated, why I kind of have a little bit of a trust issue with Yvette and Tone, personally, um, and why I'm prepared for the ADOS movement and the FBA movement to possibly have to split off. I hope that they don't, but I'm prepared that it may have to happen. And if it does, I'm okay with that because I never really trusted Yvette and Tone from the start. Now, let me say this to close out the video. I still support them for now, even though I don't agree with everything that they do and say. Oh, and I keep forgetting things. I want to keep wrapping up the video, but I keep forgetting things. Um, there's one other thing I want to talk about too, and that's the Operation Down ballot. I don't agree with that. This is another thing that makes me wonder if the ADOS movement is something that can really be trusted, or something that I don't even want to say this is a reason why they can't be, why I don't fully trust, because I do trust Yvette and Tone. I just don't fully trust them as much as I would like to. But another disagreement point I have with the movement is, for example, the Operation Down ballot thing. I was watching the show when Yvette announced Project Takeover and Operation Down ballot. I completely agree with Project Takeover. I do not agree with Operation Down ballot. I understand what Yvette is saying. I do. I understand what she's saying about how, you know, uh, we should go out because it makes us look lazy and all of this, and even if we're and some, but I get what she's saying about, basically what she's saying about about Operation Down ballot. But what I didn't like is when a brother called up disagreeing, because there's another, I guess, sort of version of Operation Down ballot, and that's no black agenda, no vote. And that's where a lot of black people, including myself, believe that we shouldn't go to the polls at all. We just shouldn't go to the polls at all. For example, in my city, we've had two black mayors back to back, and both of them have been nothing but faces for gentrification. So there's this narrative that we should go out and vote for. It's just the president that we can't vote for, but we can go out and vote for all these other politicians. No, we see in the congressional coon caucus, or what a lot of ADOS people call it, the Congressional Immigrant Caucus. These people don't deserve our votes, but they'll be the ones that's on the ballot as the Democrats. Like I said, in my own city, my mayors are black people, but they've been nothing but faces for gentrification. They don't deserve my vote. We can go all the way down to city councilmen. None of these people have black agendas for the most part across the country. Yes, there's one or two state senators, one or two city councilmen who have black agendas. But for the most part, in 97% of the country, none of these politicians from the top to the bottom of the ballot have a black agenda, whether they're Republican, Democrat, Green Party, Libertarian, Socialist, Independent, it don't matter. None of them got black agendas. So for Yvette Carnell to try to say that, oh, it's lazy to not go out and vote, it's almost like she's trying to encourage us to vote, just don't vote for president. Like, still go vote for Democrats, just don't vote for the Democrat president, which makes no sense to me. And again, don't get me wrong, it doesn't make no sense to me. I get what Yvette Carnell is saying, especially if you are one of those few black people who have that one city councilman or that one state senator who has a black agenda. Yes, that person deserves your vote. But for the most part, most of us have nothing to go out for. And Yvette is always talking about how what money we don't have to spend. Yvette and Tone are talking about, and that's another thing I'm gonna talk about before I close out this video. I'm gonna talk about one other thing too. Um, but this whole thing about Yvette and Tone are always talking about what money black people don't have. So why are you encouraging ADOS people who are in the economic condition that we're in to go out and waste our money, waste our gas money to go vote when there's nobody to vote for? If we go in and write ADOS, that's going to have the same effect as staying at home, except the fact that we save our gas money, which we might actually need, especially given the economic condition that we're in, that Yvette Carnell you're always talking about. So again, I'm not saying that the Operation Down ballot is something that you just shouldn't do at all, but I'm just saying I don't like that Yvette kind of shitted on the idea of staying home and called black people who want to stay home because there's nobody to vote for lazy. No, we're not lazy. There's just nobody to vote for. And it's almost as if Yvette, it kind of sounds like you almost want us to vote for Democrats, just don't vote for the president, which is pointless to me. Even though I still prefer you to go vote for, I still prefer you to hold your vote from the president than to vote for the president. So even if you do vote for the senators and the state politicians, if you don't vote for president, or you specifically don't vote for the Democrat, I still prefer that over actually voting for the Democrat. But again, that too, when you go out to the polls and you do all that, that's going to tempt a lot of black people. Well, I came out here, I might as well vote anyway. I might as well vote. That sometimes when it's actually time to write down or check that box or click that politician. Sometimes it's a little bit harder to actually do it when you're standing in the booth. Just like me, back in 2012, I wasn't going to vote for Barack Obama. I had already said, because back then I understood that Barack Obama wasn't doing anything for black people, I said I was going to vote for third party. And I did. But it was extremely tempting to vote for Obama once I actually got in the booth, even though I had been saying all along that I would not vote for him, because I was afraid that me not voting for him might cause Mitt Romney to win, which I thought Mitt Romney winning was worse than Barack Obama winning at that time. So it was very hard for me not to vote for Barack Obama. And it might be too hard, especially for people who just got done voting for Democrats. It might be too hard for them not to vote for the Democrat if they actually spend the energy to go spend their gas and stand in line. It might be too hard for them to write ADOS. Because once you get behind that closed curtain, the feeling is different because you feel a little different, which is why I just stopped going to vote. So I'm not tempted to give in this temptation and vote for somebody who I had no intention on voting for. And the last thing I want to say is this: there's this idea of competing conferences where tone is wine, and again, this plays into what Yvette was saying, even though it's Tone saying it. Tone is talking about how black people only have so much money, and Tariq holding the conferences might keep people from going to the ADOS conference and this, that, and the other. And again, if you guys are so concerned about the amount of money that black people have to spend for little things like gas and tickets, then why are you promoting Operation Down Ballot and telling black people who say we shouldn't go to vote at all, why are you calling them lazy if you're so concerned about gas tickets and plane tickets and stuff like this for black people? If you're concerned about them making it to the ADOS conference, because of the amount of gas or money they might spend to get to Tariq's conference, you should also be concerned with how much money they're going to spend to go down to vote, because it's a waste of gas. Even if it's not competing with your conference, it might compete with their ability to get to work the next day. So that's a hypocritical point to me. And also too, this idea it's not a competition. And this idea that we can only have one conference in a year says who? It's all the more reasons, it's all the more opportunities to network and talk and also get different perspectives, because again, there are people who Yvette Carnell does not respect and would not give a stage to on the ADOS conference, like Dr. Claude Anderson, who Tariq will give a voice to at the Foundational Black American Conference. These are different voices and different perspectives that we can hear from that have been saying the things about black Americans being a distinct ethnic identity a lot longer than Yvette, like Dr. Claude Anderson. These are the people who Tariq is going to give an opportunity to speak, and for black people to hear a different perspective, a perspective that's still on code and basically on the same agenda, but has a slightly different perspective on how we should go about things. Even though the main goal and the main agenda, which is a specific black agenda and reparations for black Americans, is the common goal for all of us. And that goal is being stuck to with the FBA conference. It's just a different opportunity to hear different voices and slightly different perspectives than the data-driven, interracial dating loving Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore. And I know that kind of sounds like I have some animosity towards them. And I'm not gonna lie. I kind of don't like the fact that they are. If it's not already obvious, I don't like the way that they defend and support, interracial dating. That kind of says something about them to me. Obviously, if that's not clear throughout this video. But again, that doesn't make them all around bad people. I still am very grateful for the attention that they've brought to the ADOS movement. I'm glad for the leadership, the information, the intelligence, the courage that they have brought to the movement. They have done a lot of invaluable work that cannot be taken away. And that's how I want to close this video. I want to thank Yvette and Tone for all the work they have done. I want to let it be known that I appreciate them. But at the same time, I have a lot of disagreements with them. And I don't like the fact that they came at Tariq the way they did over something so silly, over some misconception that was promoted by an agent. Also, we are not competing. There's not some rule where we can only have one conference in a year. Um, that's all nonsense, and it almost sounds like jealousy to me, if that's what people are concerning themselves with. It's silly stuff like that. And I want to close the video. I also want to say too, and sometimes I wonder if that's what this attack was really about, is that it was not really about the fact that Agent Ebro pointed out what Tariq said, but basically based on the fact that Yvette and Tone kind of never liked Tariq from day one, and they were just waiting for the right time to turn on him, which I hope that wasn't the case. But that's what it looks like, especially when you dive deeper into what they're disagreeing over. It's a bunch of petty BS that should not be disagreed over. Having a foundational Black American conference is not something that should be disagreed over. What Tariq said is not something that should be disagreed over. And also, the fact that someone is even calling themselves a foundational Black American. People can take the word American descendants of slaves and twist it if you look at it. Because someone can say, I'm an American and I'm a descendant of slaves, so I'm an American descendant of slaves. Because technically they are, if you add on both. If you're, let's say you're a Jamaican immigrant, or not a Jamaican immigrant, but you're the child of Jamaican immigrants. In the U.S. Constitution and by U.S. law and by all legal standards, if you were born in the U.S., you're a U.S. citizen. So you're an American. That's stage one, right? And then step two, you're also a descendant of slaves. You may not be a descendant of American slaves, but you're a descendant of slaves. So if Yvette and Tone they keep going on and on about how the AUS designator is for specificity, but it can be twisted, because if you really wanted to be precise, you would be DOAS, which is the descendants of American slaves. That is more accurate than American descendants of slaves. Descendants of American slaves is a more accurate term, because if we really want to nitpick, Caribbean people, second generation and third generation Black Caribbean immigrants are ADOS. If you're a second or third generation Black Caribbean immigrant, you are an ADOS if we really want to be technical. But you're not a DOAS, which is descendant of American slaves. But Tariq uses a term called foundational Black American, which also to me is not as confusable and as misconstruable as ADOS. So that's yet another point that nobody really has a reason to be upset over. Tariq came out with his designator, but again, he said over and over, they mean the same thing. And I agree, and that's how I understand it to mean the same thing. That's why myself and others have used the terms interchangeably and together. I've used ADOS FBA. That's what I call it. I've tweeted ADOS FBA, put those words back to back, because they mean the same thing to me. But I'm just saying, if we really want to nitpick on what terms we should be calling ourselves, I'm, again, more likely to go with FBA, because ADOS can be misconstrued into something that it's not. It can be twisted. It's more open to be twisted and manipulated into meaning something that it doesn't mean, as opposed to FBA. There's not much manipulation you can do with that term. Foundational meaning you had to be here. You have to have lineage going back to the foundation of this country, and then Black American. It's hard to twist that. or at least it's harder to twist that than ADOS, at least in my opinion. But anyway, again, one more time, just to make it clear, because I know this is a long video and people aren't going to listen to everything or whatever. But I respect and like Tone and the Vet. I appreciate what they've done. I just have a lot of problems with them, and I'm not surprised that I'm starting to see some of the things I'm starting to see come from them because of the fact that I didn't trust them for the reasons that I just discussed throughout this video. But anyway, like, share, subscribe. Peace.